statement by the revitalized Transitional Government National Unity Delegation on the status of the Tumaini initiative. The revitalized Transitional Government Delegation at the Tumaini initiative talks in Nairobi would like to issue this statement on the status of the talks at the conclusion of the January-February 2025 round of the talks. One, last year, His Excellency President Salva Kiir Mayardit requested his counterpart, His Excellency President William Samoei Ruto of Kenya, to help bring the holdout and the other opposition groups on the table with the government in order to bring about inclusivity in the implementation of the revitalized agreement on the racial conflict in the Republic of South Sudan. The talks were launched in May 2004. Two, in August, the parties to the talks reached a draft agreement on 8 protocols, with another one on power sharing still outstanding. 3, as is the practice in any negotiations, the government delegation took the draft protocols to Juba for the revitalized Transitional Government National Unity to study as to either adopt them or suggest amendments before signature. The Article delegation and the parties to the RRCs subjected the 8 protocols to a close scrutiny and came up with important suggestions to be negotiated with the holdout and the opposition groups, and that became the Article position paper whenever the talks resumed. The core of this position, as was the case in the 8 protocols, was that the Article must continue to be the basis of the talks. Excellency President Salva Kiir Mayardit sent a delegation to meet His Excellency Ruto to deliver to him a position of the government on the upcoming round of talks. The meeting took place at the State House on the 8th of October 2024, and the entire Kenyan mediation team was in attendance. When the talks resumed in November, December 2024, the mediation denied the government delegation its right to table its position paper in the talks. Instead, it came up with a 4-point agenda point, namely the relationship between the revitalized agreement and Tumaini process, repetitions, contradictions, and mechanism structures of the RRCs, responsibility sharing, and time to sign the final agreement. For the sake of continuation of the talks, the Article delegation accepted the agenda. However, the opposition side rejected the agenda in its entirety, insisting that there was nothing to discuss but this power sharing, and the 8 protocols must be signed as they were. The reaction of the mediation was to abandon their 4-point agenda and came up on the 14th of December with another paper they termed a bridging proposal. However, how the mediation can think of a bridging proposal when it hasn't allowed the parties to discuss their respective positions defeated our thinking. At this point, our delegation requested to have a recess in order to go and consult with our government on the way forward. The request was granted for the talks to resume in mid-January 2025. The mediation issued a statement to that effect. While in Juba, the mediation attempted to bring the date of the resumption of the talks forward without consultation with our delegation. In Juba, the delegation briefed the presidency and the parties to the RT-GONO on what took place in between November and December 2024 round talks. The delegation was instructed to continue asking for its right to table its position in the talks. A position, as mentioned earlier, was agreed by all the parties to the RT-GONO. Before the commencement of the talks on the 9th of January 2005, the opposition delegation threw a spinner in the works by transforming itself into a military organization with a commander-in-chief and chief of staff of their army. Consequently, true to their words, they divided South Sudan into 10 military zones. The President wrote to his counterpart, the Kenyan President, stressing that the government delegation be allowed to table its position in the talks and expressed concern over the new development regarding the opposition adopting the military option in the middle of the talks. The talks resumed on 20th of January 2025. Delegation, the Article delegation, requested that its position be tabled and sought explanation on the fact that the opposition declared military operations inside the soil of Kenya that was mediating peaceful resolution of the problems in South Sudan. Indeed, the delegation was allowed to table its position, which was shelved by the mediation, which came back with the old 4-point agenda that was rejected by the opposition as above. The 2 points were added. They often repeated root causes of the problem in an item on discussing the new name of the opposition, which our side objected to on grounds that the documents in the negotiation process were carrying the name holdouts and opposition groups. If an agreement was to be reached, then the opposition can invoke the amendment clause familiar to all negotiations to request a change of its name. The mediation insisted on including this as an agenda item. We had nothing to discuss with the opposition on the new name. Only our query was directed to the mediation, but they asked for more time to contact the government in Kenya on the matter. At the end of the 3-week talks, we never heard any feedback from the mediation. Again, for the sake of continuation of the talks, the Article delegation gave in. As expected, nothing came out from the discussions of the agenda item, and it was shelved again. We still await the explanation of mediation in order to be able to resume the discussions on the matter. The parties extensively deliberated on the root causes of the problem and established a joint technical committee to identify which of these causes were included in the R-axis and the draft 8 protocols, whether they were which were in order to discuss their possible inclusion into any of the prospective agreements. The committee rendered a report listing that what they saw as root causes of the problem, but requested more time to complete the task. The parties started discussion on the relationship between the R-axis and the Tumaini initiative. In the middle of that, the mediation came up with the idea of issuing a statement on the current status of the talks. After consulting the parties and stakeholders, it was agreed that the mediation presents a draft for the parties to look at. On the 7th of January 2025, the mediation tabled a draft statement titled Communique of the 8th February 2025 by the high-level mediation for South Sudan, the Tumaini initiative. And the parties agreed to make their comments on it the next day. On the 8th of January 2025, the parties presented their comments in the plenary session. It was agreed to form a committee to harmonize their various positions. The committee, chaired by the deputy mediator, started its work, identified the points of disagreement, and agreed to consult with the respective delegations for possible compromises or trade-offs and come up to the plenary for the finalization of the agreement on the statement. When the meeting resumed, the parties were surprised that in deviation from what was agreed by the committee and everyone else expected, the mediation came up with a firm position that they were issuing a statement, read it to the stand delegates, and proceeded to publicize it as we have allowed, all followed in the media. It is true that the Article delegation requested for a recess in order for its senior members, who are key in the preparations for the new 2 years extension of the transitional period commencing 22nd of February 2025, to take part in that and then come back afterwards. The request was accepted by the mediation. Finally, as things stand at the end of January-February session, progress was made in the agreement on the agenda and work on the root causes of the problem, albeit incomplete. Thank you.